Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today I'm going to show you my round 2 game from the Pula Open. This game is extremely interesting because it featured a variation of the Caro-Kann that I have never ever seen before this game. And I'm playing International Master Nenad Doric, whom I know well. He is the arbiter at Varsar, so we spent quite some time together during the last few Varsar Open tournaments. And he is a great person, a great chess player. He knows a ton of things. He has been a coach for Croatian teams for a while. He prepped a lot of players, and his prep is supreme, absolutely. So he played the apocalypse attack in the Caro-Kann against me. So after e4, c6, knight f3, d5, now the normal move is, knight c3, two knights, and so on. But he exchanges and plays knight e5. And I may have seen it before, but I definitely couldn't remember anything. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew that this was a move. So I started thinking. And I managed to play extremely precisely for the next 20 moves or so. Literally every move I made is either the top engine choice or one of the best moves. So somehow I managed to find the best setup against this. Even though there were alternatives that are more commonly played, what I did was perfectly fine, and I managed to find my way around the apocalypse attack. Now the funny thing is, in round, what was it, 8, I faced an English FM on the same board, literally the same board in the tournament hall with the black pieces. He played the same thing. So are people trying to find surprises against the Caro-Kann when they play me? That was my conclusion, because this is so offbeat. Mr. Doric mentioned that Magnus Carlsen plays this, and he said that, he was preparing for the game, and then he remembered this line that Carlsen plays. So it's an interesting opening. The idea is pretty similar to what happens in the accelerated Panov, where black can have problems down this diagonal, and there are many lines in the accelerated Panov where bishop b5 check is played, and black has to play knight bd7. So I was going to do that against this. That was my idea. That's the only thought I had. So I want to go knight bd7 if bishop b5 is played. So therefore, I'm going to develop my king side with g6, bishop g7. I started with knight f6, which is one of the best moves. Knight c6 is most common, a6 is also played, knight d7 is also played, but knight f6 is perfectly fine, one of the top engine choices. He plays d4 and now g6. I don't want to move my bishop away, I don't want to have trouble down the diagonal. Also, when I play knight bd7, I'm threatening to take on e5 in many cases. So bishop b5, knight bd7, of course not bishop d7, because then my pieces are awkward and my opponent gets to trade the knight for my bishop if they want to. Castles, bishop g7, rook e1, castles, and here he plays knight f3. And here's the thing, I do not engine check my games during a tournament. I do not analyze my games with the engine. I wait until I can get home, analyze them properly, and then I engine check them. The fact that Mr. Doric played knight f3 here at the time was relatively insignificant to me. Of course, the knight isn't pinned anymore, so I may be able to take and go knight e4, but I didn't understand the significance of the move. And as you're going to see in round 8, when I show you that game, the English FIDE master did not move the knight back, and I had a winning position out of the opening. So one of the main ideas for playing knight f3 is that if they, let's say, play bishop d3, which is very common, then black has knight e5, d5, and knight g4, and this is completely winning for black. This pawn is hanging, there's no way to defend it. f4 of course loses to queen b6 because e3 is covered twice, and bishop f4 loses to the simple f6. And I don't want to spoil my round 8 game, but that's how it could have gone. The point is, from now on, I'm going to analyze my game during tournaments, because this is the first time that an opening has been repeated and it's an opening I'd never seen before, and I wasn't prepared. So I could have won my round 8 game on move 10. Okay, in any case, Mr. Doric played knight f3. And here I played a6. Not that it's the most precise move. The engine says it's the best move, but the most precise with a very similar evaluation, 0.1 perhaps, is knight e4. That's what people played. And Mr. Doric told me after the game, a6 is unnecessary. When I was analyzing this position, we found the plan of knight b8, knight c6. And I did consider that during the game, but it seemed a bit too slow. Now, the reason a6 isn't the most precise is that the bishop wants to go back to d3 anyway. And another thing is, I don't really want to go b5, because if I go b5, a4 is coming. So a6 is, even though the engine approves of the move, I think it's imprecise. Okay, so I played rook e8. Obviously, if I go b5, then a4 undermines my queen side, my rook is undefended, and I'm losing. So rook e8, h3. I don't know, maybe playing against knight g4, maybe playing against the future bishop g4. I wasn't sure this move was necessary. I played queen c7. Another idea behind h3 is when you play bishop f4, you want to have a square for your bishop on h2 if knight h5 comes. Black's main pawn break is e5, and I'm playing for e5. So if, let's say, I don't play queen c7 here, which I did, then bishop f4, and if knight h5, then the bishop has a square on h2. But I prevented that with queen c7. That seemed like the most natural move to me, and it's the best move. I'm just preventing the bishop from reaching its ideal square. c3. And now I somehow have to develop my bishop. I wanted to desperately play knight e4, because bishop f4 is coming. My opponent can play queen c1 once the bishop moves away. And then bishop f4 will come. So I need to be able to play knight e4 without losing a pawn, and then follow that up with e5. So at this point I spent a long time thinking, and b6 is the best move. Okay, bishop e3, bishop b7. Now I'm ready for knight e4. Queen c1. Now you see the point behind b6 and bishop b7. Once again, b5 couldn't have been played because of a4, but now I can play knight e4. And I asked Mr. Doric after the game what he thinks about this. He said he liked the IQP position for white. And I thought it was equal. It is equal. And my plan is the best plan. I can understand what he means by he liked it for white. It was very, very hard for black to find the plan afterwards. But the point behind knight e4 with the bishop on b7 is now I'm covering the e5 square 4 times, and I'm ready to meet bishop f4 with e5. So I don't have to move my queen, I don't have to relinquish the diagonal. He did play bishop f4, and this sequence was played very quickly. e5. I mean, I was slightly afraid that he was going to go d5, and on knight e5, that he was going to play knight d4. And having an isolated queen's pawn so effectively blockaded seemed dangerous to me. But maybe it's not dangerous because I have knight d3 here. So, okay, it doesn't work yet. Knight d3 is, you know, a fine move, but I was afraid of something like that. In any case, he took with the knight, knight e5, bishop e5, bishop e5, d5, rook e5. Okay, knight d2. And I wasn't sure what to do here. I was afraid of knight b3, knight d4, or knight f3, knight d4. Again, with the same idea of blockading the IQP. So this was my first imprecise move. I took on d2. The engine wants me to play knight c5, which is understandable, you know, gains a tempo, and then I can double up my rooks. But even knight d2 is fine. The evaluation changes by 0.1. Okay, queen d2, rook a8, a normal move, and if my opponent takes on e5 now, I can play queen e5, and I'm controlling the e-file. That was my goal. So he played rook e2, and now I played queen c6, which seemed very good to me. I think this forces white to trade on e2, because I'm now ready to play d4. The reason they have to trade on e5 is because there is no bishop f1 if they don't. So they need an extra tempo to play bishop f1. Alternatively, if they go f3, then there could be trouble down the diagonal. For example, f3, queen c5, I don't know, king h1, rook e2, queen e3. And after queen e3, I'm, threatening to take the queen. If they trade, I gain a tempo on the bishop, and then I don't know where the bishop goes, but black definitely isn't worse. So rook e5, bishop f1. Okay, now I played queen e6, of course, gaining control of the e-file. The best move has to be, because it's the most natural move. I just don't want to give away the e-file. My opponent played queen f4, and I wasn't sure what to do here. I wanted to play queen f6, and I wanted to get my king to the center, so I played king g7. Okay, I was aware of what he was going to do, queen d4, excuse me, but now queen f6. And all the moves so far were either the best moves or among the best moves from both sides. Rook d1, rook e4, chasing the queen away. I spoke to my friend after the game, and he told me that a queen trade did not seem good, and Mr. Doric told me after the game that he didn't think a queen trade was good. I mean, conceptually, if you have an IQP, you want to keep the pieces on the board, but with the d-pawn blockaded, there isn't much I can do, so I think my decision was correct. And, the engine approves of it. It's not like it was the only line, but it was one of the best. Okay, queen f6, king f6, f3, chases the rook away, rook e6. I want my rook on e6 so that I can go rook d6, and I'm also defending the 6th rank in all lines. Okay, king f2, king e5, g3, g5. And I think g5 is an important move, because I don't want to allow f4 by white to come unopposed. This is very likely going to be an endgame where we each have a bishop on the light squares. So yeah, okay, rook d4, as expected. Now I made my first mistake, and it's a very serious mistake. And I remember vividly, after I'd made my move, Mr. Doric drawing a dot next to my move, and in my mind that meant, bad move. So that kind of upset me, and as soon as I saw him draw that dot next to the move, I realized what I had done. The reason I made this mistake, I played b5. The reason I played b5 is because I was afraid of c4. Why was I afraid of c4? Well, I wanted to play king d6. And when I play king d6, if my opponent goes c4, the pawn is pinned. Let's say I do nothing, I play f6. They take on d5, bishop takes d5, bishop c4. And now if I go rook e5, there is f4. gf4, gf4, my rook has to move away to either f5 or to h5 to defend the bishop. And my rook is slightly offside, and my bishop is still pinned. So I'd have to play something like king c5, but then maybe b4 comes. So I wanted to prevent c4 because my king is going to have to go to d6. So I played b5. Now, why is it bad? It's bad because it creates targets along the light squares, and it creates a hook that a4 can break. So now a4 becomes the best move. Furthermore, all of my pawns are on light squares now. So any bishop endgame is much worse for me than it used to be. Also, I'm not covering the c5 square, and that's perhaps the biggest downside of this mistake. Now, once the white king inevitably reaches d4, I will not be able to cover both sides with pawns. Imagine a position where we've traded rooks, the white king is on d4, I have a pawn on f6, I have a pawn on b6, the white king cannot make any progress. Now, in the same position with the pawn on b5, if my king ever moves away from d6, the white king enters the position via c5 and white wins. That's the biggest downside. In any case, f4, the position is still equal. b5 is a slight inaccuracy according to the engine, but for humans, b5 is very bad. Okay, I have to take, g takes. My opponent took with the rook, and I was really happy to go into the bishop endgame because I couldn't see a way for white to make progress, and it's absolutely correct what I did. Rook f6 is equal. Okay, king e3, I took on f4, gf4, king d6, king d4. Now, after I played f6, it's very easy to visualize that this would have been a dead drawn position with my pawn on b6. There's simply no way for either king to enter the position. However, with the pawn on b5, it's a different story. Not that black's losing, black can lose. h4, bishop c8, I want to prevent bishop h3. And I want to be able to defend my pawn from e6 if I need to. So this is the main target. I need to be able to defend it. I don't want my bishop stuck on b7. Why? Well, if my bishop is stuck on b7, let's just say h6, bishop g2. Now, my king and my bishop, or sorry, my bishop is undefended. So when b3 comes and c4 comes, I'm going to be in Zugzwang because my bishop must remain on c6 in order to remain defended. I'll just give you an example. Black waits, b3, black waits, c4, losing. Because now the pawn on d5 is attacked, the bishop is hanging, and I lose the game. That's it. I take, they take, I can no longer defend the pawn, and that's the end of the game. So that's why on h4 I played bishop c8. I want to be able to defend the pawn from this side. Now with bishop g2, I just go bishop e6. Bishop d3, h6, bishop c2, bishop h3 is fine, a4. And at this point, I had probably more than half an hour on the clock, maybe even more, I don't really remember, and I wasn't sure what to do. I knew that I'm holding everything together. I can always go bishop g2 if my opponent attacks the pawn. Now a4, of course, attempts to create a target on b5, and I played the losing move. After 40 good moves with 39 good moves, one mistake, I blundered the game away here. Pause the video, what would you do here? Okay, so there are a few options. Firstly, playing b4 is absolutely losing, that makes no sense. Playing king c6 makes no sense either, because my opponent's going to take and have a permanent target on b5. So I either do nothing with my king or with the pawn and play something like bishop g2, or I take on a4. I played bishop g2, losing the game on the spot. And I knew what white was going to do. I just didn't visualize correctly the Zugzwang I'm going to find myself in. Of course, Mr. Doric played a5, and now the game is losing. Now I have to watch out for two things. Firstly, this pawn falling. Secondly, the bishop coming anywhere on this diagonal and infiltrating on c8, after which I can resign. The reason why bishop c8 is devastating is not because this pawn is hanging. I can defend that pawn. I can, defend the c8 square. Once say the bishop is on f5, I can just go king c7, preventing bishop c8. But I really cannot, in reality, because my pawn is on b5 and the king enters via c5. Therefore, the game is losing. I have two weaknesses, bishop c8 and the pawn on d5, and I can no longer defend. Bishop h3, I immediately took that diagonal. Bishop d1, bishop c8, bishop f3. Now I have to defend. Once again, if I go bishop b7, let's say, then b3, bishop c6, okay, now c4 doesn't work. It doesn't work because the bishop is defended, but a simple waiting move, like here, and that's it, Zugzwang. I move my king c5 wins, I move my bishop c4 wins, game over. So I had to go bishop e6. And after bishop e6, my opponent can just do the same thing, unfortunately. b3, bishop f7, I have to, I cannot move my bishop anywhere along the h3ca diagonal. I must remain on the a2ga diagonal, but I cannot relinquish either diagonal. Bishop f7, bishop g4, over. I played king c7. If my opponent plays king c5, it's still winning. There's just a trick with d4, and after d4, the fact that I'm winning the pawn on b3 makes no difference. My opponent can just take and play d5, and I can resign, because it's all per tempo. But Mr. Doric played an even more precise move, b4. I played king c6, bishop c8, bishop g8, and now I'm kind of hoping that, you know, my opponent's going to take on a6, and that I'll be able to trap the bishop with bishop e6, for example. Takes, and here. Okay, that's great. However, I'm playing an IM, and that's never going to happen. So he played f5, and now he's just threatening to take on c8. I played bishop h7. If they take on a6, I take on f5, but bishop e6, and that's it. King d6. Once again, if bishop takes d5, then bishop takes f5, but the final move of the game crushes me, h5, and here I resigned. I think this is a beautiful endgame, perfect technique from Mr. Doric. Congratulations to him for outplaying me after, you know, first I played b5, and then on a4 I didn't take. Now let's go back. On a4, I allowed a5. If I take on a4, this is just a draw. There's absolutely nothing white can do. Because now, let's say I wait, bishop g2, I don't know, bishop d1, let's say, it doesn't matter. Bishop h1, bishop e2, I can just go a5, and that's it. The king cannot enter. I'm always defending this pawn. Everything's going to be traded off, and the game's a dead draw. The fact that I didn't visualize this correctly is worrying. I think this is a very easy position to visualize, and I had plenty of time on the clock. I did my best in this game to play good, solid moves. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of Mr. Doric, but in the end, I lost like a complete patzer. But this game is a great lesson to me. Firstly, because I learned the new opening, the Apocalypse attack. Secondly, because of b5. And it's remarkable how costly b5 turned out to be. Okay, thank you guys for watching. I'm going to show you my round 3 game very soon. Stay tuned for more chess. Let me know what you think. Bye-bye.